Welcome to VVork. In the previous video, we learned how to create custom object groups using object names. Now we're going to learn how to create custom object groups using properties. Welcome back. In the previous few videos, we've seen how to create custom object groups based on relationships, metrics, and object name. In this video, we're going to learn how to create custom object groups based on properties. And if you haven't already noticed, this is going to be a longer video because I've got lots of great demonstrations, lots of great use cases. As you can see, here they come. So in the first in our list here, what we're going to do is take a look at how to create a custom object group that contains clusters that have DRS enabled. So let's do that. We'll go to our lab environment. As you can see, I've left off where I was before. Let me quit out of here. And once again, we'll go to Environment, Environment Overview, Custom Groups, and we'll hit the Add button. And to remind myself here, this is going to be clusters with DRS enabled. All right. Again, I should specify a group type and a policy type. Go back to the first video on custom object groups if you don't already know what these two fields are about. I'm going to check this checkbox because I want my group to be dynamic. And since this is a group of clusters, I'm going to start by typing cluster. I'll choose cluster compute resource. And this time, instead of choosing metrics, relationships, or object name, we're going to choose properties. Because objects like clusters and VMs and hosts and data stores and data centers and vCenter servers and non-vSphere objects too all have a bunch of interesting properties. So kind of like they have performance metrics that get gathered every 5 minutes, there are properties that get gathered every 5 minutes too. For instance, with properties, we can, on a cluster, we can go and check things like the configuration. Actually, I'm not looking for the name. Where is it? By the way, if you notice, I'm hunting around here trying to find the option itself. Take advantage of the filter here. If I search for enabled, there we go. This should help me find it more easily. Let's see. DRS configuration enabled. There we go. So I can very quickly, easily, either by searching through the whole tree or filtering, I can find the property that I'm looking for, select it, and then we have our usual choices of is not, contains, and not contains. I'm going to say is, and notice here in this drop-down list, you would expect to see the choices of both true and false. In this case, though, the reason you only see the choice true is because in my environment, DRS is turned on all of the clusters in my entire environment. So there's already been some filtering that's taken place here that vRealize Operations has performed for you. So in this case here, it's going to be kind of boring. I'm going to choose true. So find all the clusters that have DRS enabled. If I click preview, there's all my clusters. And I know if I go over to the vSphere client, I could prove to you that these clusters have DRS turned on. But that would be boring. So we're not going to do that. Instead, now that we've learned how to create a custom object group that's all the clusters that have DRS enabled, we could do the same thing for HA. So I'm going to choose HA. Obviously, what I need to change down below for HA, actually, let me go back here. I created a slide. Let's use the slide. So the next thing we're looking for is clusters that have HA enabled. Again, I can do that doing essentially the same thing that I just did before, but obviously I'll change the name of the group. But the other key thing I need to change is this property. We're now not looking for DRS is enabled. We're looking for is HA enabled. So let's clear our filter here and see if we can find it. So if we go to cluster configuration, that's where we saw DRS configuration enabled before. So there's enabled again for DRS. And if I had a distributed power management turned on my DRS cluster, I could see if that was enabled too. But I don't see HA anywhere. And if I look everywhere throughout here, I won't find HA. The reason why I don't see HA in this list is because the name of the property that vCenter returns for HA uses the old name for HA. I'm talking old as in more than 10 years ago. It used to be called the Distributed Availability Service, HA. Used to be called that, but now HA, High Availability in vSphere, is just known as HA. So that's why it's labeled DAS, but if you pretend instead of saying DAS it said HA, if you were to drill down into this HA section, there's HA enabled. We select HA enabled, and now notice that I only see false because in my environment, the only thing I've got is clusters that have HA turned off. But if I wanted to, I could go to the vSphere client, turn HA on and off on different clusters, and I would get both choices. If I had a mix, I'd see both choices of true and false. All right, so now you know how to create custom object groups that contain clusters that have DRS enabled or clusters with HA enabled. So that's pretty straightforward. But what else can we do? Well, let's continue onwards. So back to our slides. The next thing that we're going to do is take a look at how to create a custom object group that contains VMs that are in a specific VM folder. So let's go into the lab environment and do that. Let me cancel what we were working on before. There goes all my hard work. And I'm going to go into the vSphere client to show you what we mean by a VM folder. So I'm going to go in the vSphere client into the VMs and templates view. And in the VMs and templates view, we see these different virtual machines. And if you go into these folders, you can see we have folders that contain other virtual machines. This thing here called Discovered Virtual Machines and this one here called vSAN-VMs are examples of VM folders. In vSphere, these VM folders allow us to organize our virtual machines. You don't want to have 1,000 different virtual machines all in one big messy pile. You want to be able to group them into these things called VM folders. If you want to, you can create your own VM folders by selecting the data center, right-clicking the data center, going to new folder, and as you can see, we can create new VM folders and other types of folders. But if I wanted to, I could create a new VM folder. I'm going to do that right here. I'm going to call this Brian's VM folder to illustrate a point here. So I now have a new VM folder called Brian's VM folder, which has nothing in it, but that's okay for our purposes. What I'm going to do is rush back here to the vRealize Operations Manager screen, go back to Environment, Environment Overview, Custom Groups, click Add. And again, to remind you, and to remind myself, we're looking for VMs in a specific VM folder. So let's type that. VMs in a specific, S-P-E-C-I-F-I-C, specific VM folder. And we'll make this look really nice here and type capital F. Go back to the first video on custom object groups if you don't know what these two fields are. I'm going to stop explaining that. Instead, I'm just going to choose dynamic. This is going to be a group of virtual machines, not virtual machine folders. Now, subtle point here. This is a custom object group of VMs that are in a virtual machine folder. So we're not looking for objects that are VM folders. We're looking for objects that are virtual machines. So we're going to choose properties, just like we did previously. And this time I'm cheating here and looking. We're going to go to Summary, Runtime. So Summary, scroll down a bit to Runtime, expand Runtime. And one of the things that we have here under Runtime is Power State. Actually, that's where we're going to go looking in a moment. That's not what I'm looking for. I'm actually not looking for something in Runtime. On second thought, I'm looking for Summary vSphere folder. So if I choose Summary vSphere folder, here I have my usual choices. And here I have a list of only 2 of the VM folders that I mentioned previously. Previously, I mentioned VM folders called Discovered VMs, vSAN VMs, and my new one called Brian's VMs. But Brian's VMs is not showing up in VRealize Operations for a reason that you've probably already figured out. And that's because VRealize Operations isn't going to detect that new VM folder for up to 5 minutes. It's going to take until the next collection interval before we actually see that VM folder. But there's nothing in that VM folder, so I'm not going to worry about it. Instead, I'm just going to choose one of these VM folders. And again, if we scroll down, to our preview button, we discover that, yep, the vSAN VMs in my vSAN VM folder are showing up in my custom object group exactly the way I wanted. So I moments ago showed you that in the drop-down list that we saw here for our VM folders, we only saw 2 of the VM folders. We saw discovered VMs, we saw vSAN VMs, those are the 2 VMs that we just matched, but we didn't see Brian's VM folder or its VMs because the data collection has not yet occurred. But there's another VM folder that we can't see, which is one that you never see in the vSphere client. In the vSphere client, there are certain folders that exist in vCenter that are never shown in the vSphere client. For instance, there's a VM folder that gets created automatically, but you never see it here in the vSphere client. It's hidden from you. It's a folder, a VM folder called, simply enough, a folder called VM, but you will never see that in the vSphere client. Why do we create it? Why does it exist? Well, it exists because all of the VM folders that we create, like Brian's VM folder, discovered VMs, and vSAN VMs, all of the VM folders that we create need to land somewhere, so they land in that hidden VM folder called VM. So notice, if you will, that in vRealize Operations Manager, if we're working with the vSphere folder property, that folder called VM, the one that's created by default, but it's hidden from you in the vSphere client, does not show up in vRealize Operations if you choose the property called vSphere folder. But notice, if we instead look at the parent folder, which is a different property, let's go find that one. So let me go look for parent. Not vSphere folder, but parent folder is another property. Where is it? Not parent cluster, not parent data center, but parent folder is another property that's available to us in vRealize Operations. And notice that it matches. Wow, look at our whole huge list here. I'm a little surprised. Not quite certain why it's showing discovered virtual machine twice. I expected it to show VM, my VM folder, the one called Brian's VM folder. So a little glitch here. I'll look at that. If I need to submit a bug report, I'll do so. I suspect we just happened to catch it a few moments too soon. So imagine, if you will, this said Brian's VM folder. But the key thing that I'm trying to show you right now is here's that hidden VM folder that you never see in the vSphere client. If we select it and hit the preview button, all of these VMs that we see here are all of these VMs here that are not in any of the user-created VM folders. So the key point that I'm striving to get across in these last 2 demonstrations is the difference between vSphere folder and parent folder. So if you want to be able to pick VMs that are in the topmost VM folder, the hidden VM folder called VMs, you need to make certain you're working with the parent folder property. All right, so there's another example. Let's hit cancel. We'll go back to our slides. Hang on, I missed cancel. There we go. We'll go back to our slides, and next up, well, we talked about this item here, but what about VMs that are powered off? That's another property. You may have noticed it before. So environment overview, custom groups, add. I'll call this one VMs that are powered off. Again, you know what these 2 fields are. If not, go back to the first video on custom object groups. And again, this is going to be for virtual machines, a group of virtual machines. Again, we're going to be looking at a property. And this time, well, again, we could just shortcut this here and look for power. Let's see what we've got. Power. So summary runtime power state sounds really promising. Summary runtime power state. Again, we have our usual comparators here. I'll choose is. And I have a collection of VMs that are powered on and powered off. So both choices show up in this list. On the other hand, if all my VMs were powered off, I would only see power off. If all my VMs were powered on, I would only see powered on. Again, if you don't see all the choices that you expect to see here, like we saw occurring with our clusters, searching for DRS or HA enabled, remember that this list is filtered. It's only going to show you things that could possibly match the current state of your inventory. So let's go find all the VMs that are powered off. I select powered off. I scroll down to our preview button, and these virtual machines, including these two obviously named ones, are all the VMs that are powered off in my environment. Great, there's another example. Now, one more example. Let's find all the hosts that are in maintenance mode. That could be useful. So we'll hit cancel. We'll go to environment, environment overview, custom groups, add. And we're going to find this time hosts that are in maintenance mode. Again, skipping those two fields, go to the first video on custom object groups to learn about those. We're trying to find hosts, so let's choose, be careful, host system. So this is going to be custom object group of hosts. We're looking for a property this time, and you might want to hit the pause button and figure out how are you going to find the property for a host that's in maintenance mode. So now that you're back from hitting pause and figuring it out yourself, we can probably find it easily by searching for maintenance. Yep, looks like we're going to find it. Maintenance state is in maintenance mode. So let's go find all our hosts that are in maintenance mode in this custom object group. We'll preview, and it says that host ESXi02 is in maintenance mode, but let's prove it to ourselves. We'll go over to vSphere. We'll go into host and clusters view, and let's find host number 2. There's host number 2, and what's that little icon show us here? That host is in maintenance mode. It's the only host that is. So now you know how to create all sorts of different types of custom object groups that are based on properties. In the next video, we'll learn how to use vSphere tags in vRealize operations.